Okay, so get this. We're diving into the Valerie Plame affair.
Oh, yeah. This one is a doozy.
Yeah, it's a story full of political intrigue, betrayal, and high stakes.
Betrayal, huh?
Oh, yeah, big time. Remember that Niger uranium report that became a flashpoint in the lead up to the Iraq War?
Oh, yeah. How could we
Well,
forget?
that's where this story really explodes. And our main source for this deep dive is the exposed episode from the American Scandal podcast.
Okay, cool.
They lay out the timeline really well, but we're going to analyze the motivations, the players, and the lasting impact of it all.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's rewind to February 2002.
Okay.
Valerie Plame, a top CIA officer specializing in weapons of mass destruction, is at Langley heading up a task force on Iraq.
This is no desk jockey. She's deep in the world of intel dealing with super sensitive information.
Absolutely, and then boom, a request lands on her desk. It's from Vice President Dick Cheney's office.
Oh, boy.
They're asking the CIA to investigate a report that Iraq bought yellowcake uranium from Niger.
Yellow cake, that's a key ingredient for making weapons-grade uranium, right?
Exactly.
And this is where things start to get a little fishy, right?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. This request comes from a junior staffer in Cheney's office.
Bypassing the usual channels.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Plame is suspicious right away.
as she should be.
Yeah, she's concerned about the source of the intel and the potential for misinterpretation,
Now, let's not forget, this is all based on Italian intelligence.
which,
Didn't have the best track record, let's just say.
to put it lightly,
Yeah.
and to make matters worse, the CIA didn't even have an office in Niger at the time because of budget cuts.
Wow, that speaks volumes right there.
Right, it shows how stretched thin the intelligence community was, even as the administration was pushing for war in Iraq.
So they need to investigate this yellow cake claim, but how?
Well, Plame's boss has an idea.
What's that?
Bring in her husband, Joseph Wilson.
Oh, this is where it gets interesting.
Right, he's a former diplomat who knows Niger really well.
So a practical solution on the surface.
You'd think, but it leads to some major unintended consequences.
He's a diplomat, not a spy, right?
Exactly.
He's stepping way outside his usual role.
Into a whole different world.
So Wilson gets to CIA headquarters. They brief him on the report and Cheney's interest,
And they seem to be taking it at face value.
even though they haven't even seen the original document.
Really?
Yeah, Wilson is skeptical right off the bat.
I bet he'd call it rumor mill stuff or something.
Pretty much. But he's no fool either. He knows if Saddam is trying to get nukes, that's a game changer. So he's stuck in a tough spot.
Totally. He doesn't buy the report, but he also doesn't want to dismiss a potential threat.
This is where his stance on war comes in, right?
Yeah, he's anti-stupid war, meaning he'll support military action if it's justified, but not based on shaky evidence.
Okay, so he's approaching this from a pragmatic, evidence-based perspective.
Exactly.
So what does he do?
Despite his doubts, he agrees to go to Niger.
Wow.
But he reminds the CIA that he's not a trained operative.
They're
I
like,
basically say, just take a look around, gather some information.
so they're asking him to conduct an intelligence mission.
Without the training or the protection of a covert agent.
Interesting.
Yeah. So he arrives in Niamey, Niger, and meets with the U.S. Ambassador Barbara Owens Kirkpatrick.
Okay.
And get this, she is blown away by Wilson's mission.
What, she didn't know why he was there?
No, she had already debunked the yellow cake allegations.
No way.
Yeah, she got the information directly from Niger's president.
So she had firsthand knowledge.
And a Marine general stationed there had reached the same conclusion,
They both reported their findings to Washington.
including the CIA.
So multiple sources saying it's bogus, but they still send Wilson,
Right, it makes you wonder if someone higher up wanted to keep the story alive.
even though it had already been debunked.
Exactly.
Wow.
The ambassador even says to Wilson, someone in D.C. wants you to find something, Joe.
That's a little creepy.
Yeah, it definitely suggests someone was trying to manipulate the situation.
Maybe to build a case for war.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So Wilson spends 8 days in Niger interviewing officials conducting his investigation. His conclusion, no yellow cake sale, no attempted deal, nothing.
Case closed.
You'd think, right? But that's just the beginning.
Oh boy, here we go. So Wilson's back from Niger, mission accomplished, debunked the whole yellow cake story.
Yeah, you'd think that'd be the end of it.
You would, but this is where things get really messy.
Oh yeah, this is where we dive into politics and media manipulation.
Remember, the Bush administration is pushing hard for war in Iraq.
And that Niger uranium claim is a key piece of their argument.
Right, so fast forward to January 28th, 2003, the night of Bush's State of the Union address.
Can you imagine Plame and Wilson watching as Bush delivers those infamous 16 words?
I bet they were floored.
Totally. Bush says the British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
Wow. Knowing what they knew.
They knew it was false. The Niger story was debunked.
It's like their personal knowledge is clashing with this official narrative.
Head on, and Wilson, he's not one to stay silent.
Especially when it comes to matters of war and peace.
He starts talking to journalists off the record, trying to set things straight.
But it's not enough?
No, he needs to do more.
So he goes public.
Exactly. July 2003, he publishes an op-ed in the New York Times.
What was it called?
What I Didn't Find in Africa. And it's not subtle at all.
I bet he went right for the jugular.
He does. In the opening line, he asks, did the Bush administration manipulate intelligence about Saddam Hussein's weapons program to justify an invasion of Iraq?
Bold move.
Especially with war looming.
And what does the White House do?
Damage control?
Yeah.
They downplay Wilson's op-ed. They claim his trip was irrelevant.
Saying they had other sources for the uranium claim.
But that just raises more questions.
Like, why send Wilson in the first place if they had confirmation?
Exactly. And why not address his points instead of dismissing him?
It seems like they were more interested in silencing him than debating the facts.
And this is where things take a dark turn.
How so?
Robert Novak, a conservative columnist, is walking in D.C. one evening.
Okay.
And a stranger approaches him. Yeah, turns out it's a friend of Wilson's.
And this random encounter changes everything.
It does. The stranger criticizes Bush and then just casually mentions that Wilson's wife works at the CIA on counter-proliferation.
Just drops it like it's nothing.
And Novak decides to put that in his column.
He later regretted it, but the damage was done.
July 14th, 2003. Valerie Plame wakes up, reads Novak's column.
Oh no, he outed her.
He did use her maiden name.
Her career, her safety, her contacts, all gone.
Just like that is a total betrayal. She later compares it to a mafia hit job.
And it's hard to argue with that someone decided to use her as a weapon.
To punish her husband for speaking out.
So was this orchestrated from the White House?
That's the question. This isn't just a political scandal. This is national security.
Outing a CIA officer can compromise operations, put lives at risk,
and damage the reputation of American intelligence.
The media goes nuts demanding answers.
The Justice Department launches a criminal investigation,
trying to find out who leaked Plame's identity and why.
This investigation becomes one of the most high-profile cases.
Led by Special Counsel Patrick Fitzgerald.
He's known for his pursuit of the truth, and he's determined to follow the evidence.
No matter where it leads.
And it leads him to the media.
He subpoenas journalists.
Including Novak himself and Judith Miller from the New York Times.
Wow, demanding they reveal their sources.
This triggers a huge First Amendment battle.
The media fiercely protects their sources.
They argue that revealing them would undermine their ability to report on sensitive matters.
Especially government wrongdoing.
It's the public's right to know versus the government's need to protect secrets.
And it raises questions about the role of journalists in a democracy.
The pressure on the White House intensifies Bush vows to fire anyone involved in the leak.
But at the same time, they're stonewalling this investigation, refusing to provide documents.
Claiming executive privilege.
This just makes things worse.
It does. The public is divided. Some see the leak as justified. Others see it as an abuse of power.
And then the investigation takes a turn.
Louis Scooter, Libby Cheney's chief of staff, is indicted.
On charges of perjury, obstruction of justice, and making false statements.
This sends shockwaves through Washington.
Libby is a close confidant of the vice president.
This means the investigation is getting close to the Oval Office.
The trial takes place in 2007.
It captivates the nation and exposes the inner workings of the Bush administration.
What happens at the trial?
It's intense. The prosecution argues that Libby lied to protect himself and others in the White House.
The defense says he's a scapegoat, caught in a political game.
The jury deliberates for days.
Yeah.
They find Libby guilty on 4 of the 5 counts.
Including perjury and obstruction of justice?
He's sentenced to 30 months in prison and fined $250,000.
Wow.
But it doesn't end there. Bush commutes Libby's sentence.
He doesn't have to serve any time.
This sparks outrage among critics.
It's seen as a way to protect a loyal ally and avoid further scrutiny of the White House.
So we've got intrigue, betrayal, a high-stakes investigation, and a presidential pardon.
It's like a movie.
But this is real life with real consequences.
And those consequences are huge. The Plame affair damages the Bush administration's credibility.
It fuels public distrust in the government.
And raises serious questions about using intelligence to justify war.
But what about Plame and Wilson? How do they deal with all of this?
So Libby gets convicted, but then Bush pardons him.
Yeah. It seems like the legal battle is over.
But this thing is far from over.
Right. The ramifications are just starting to hit.
It exposed some serious problems in American politics.
Questions about accountability, truth, and abuse of power.
It definitely hurt the Bush administration's credibility.
The idea that they would leak classified info for political gain?
Especially during a war.
Yeah, it's unsettling, and this is all happening as the Iraq War is raging on.
Which was already controversial.
The Plame affair just adds more fuel to the fire.
People start questioning everything.
What information is real? Who to trust?
Are those in power really acting in the best interests of the country?
It's like the WMD situation all over again.
And this distrust isn't limited to the government. It extends to the media, too. The Plame affair shows the tough spot journalists are in.
They have to inform the public, but they also have to protect their sources.
Especially when those sources are exposing wrongdoing.
Judith Miller goes to jail for refusing to name her source.
That sparked a huge debate about press freedom.
Some say journalists should cooperate with law enforcement.
Especially in national security cases.
Others see it as a dangerous precedent.
The slippery slope towards censorship.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
Where's the line between the public's right to know and national security?
And who decides where that line is?
It's a debate that's still going on today.
Especially with all the leaks and whistleblowing these days.
And it's easy to forget about the human cost of all this.
Plame and Wilson are real people whose lives were shattered.
Plame had to resign from the CIA.
Her career as a covert operative was over.
She wrote a memoir called Fair Game.
She details her experience and criticizes the Bush administration.
Wilson became a vocal critic of the Iraq War.
But he faced attacks and accusations.
Their marriage couldn't survive the strain.
It's a reminder that political games have real consequences.
For individuals and families.
The Plame affair shows the danger of unchecked power.
How easily personal vendettas and political maneuvering can damage national security.
And undermine public trust.
It also shows how important whistleblowers are.
Those willing to speak out, even when it's risky.
So, what lessons can we learn from this?
And how can we apply them today?
That's the big question.
I think we need strong oversight and accountability.
Systems that prevent these abuses of power.
And we need to protect whistleblowers.
Encourage people to come forward without fear of retaliation.
And a free and independent press is crucial.
They act as a watchdog, keeping those in power in check.
Absolutely. The Plame affair is a dark moment in our history.
But it reminds us that freedom isn't a given.
We have to be vigilant, engaged, and hold those in power accountable.
It's a case that still matters today.
It reminds us about truth, transparency, and the balance between security and freedom.
Well said.
So as we wrap up, I keep wondering, could this have been prevented?
What if things were different?
Stronger safeguards, tougher consequences for leaking.
A better culture of accountability.
These are questions we need to think about.
Not just as individuals, but as a society.
We need to understand why this happened.
And how to stop it from happening again.
That's something we all need to consider.